In the twilight of The Sopranos, specifically within the episode Remember When, the open ocean becomes a crucible for the deteriorating relationship between Tony Soprano and Paulie Gualtieri. Fleeing a potential indictment for a murder committed decades prior, the two men find themselves on a rented sport fishing boat off the coast of Florida. While the setting suggests leisure, bright sun, blue water, and fishing lines trailing in the wake, the reality is a claustrophobic psychological horror story. The boat serves as a lawless vacuum, removed from the societal constraints of New Jersey and the eyes of the FBI, distilling their dynamic down to its most primal form, a predator contemplating the disposal of a wounded, noisy liability. The scene opens with a stark contrast in energy that defines the lethal subtext of the encounter. Paulie is frantic, moving with a manic, nervous energy as he prepares a pasta lunch in the boat's galley. His actions are not merely those of a host, they are the desperate performance of a court jester trying to prove his utility to a king who has stopped smiling.
Rigatoni alla Paulie. But since you're eating it, maybe it should be rigatoni alla Tony.
Paulie renames the dish in Tony's honor, a sycophantic gesture intended to flatter the boss and reinforce a sense of camaraderie. However, beneath this culinary offering lies a desperate plea for survival. Paulie senses the malice radiating from Tony, and his chatter, filled with nervous laughter, is an attempt to fill the silence, for he knows that in the silence, Tony is judging him.
Oh, man.
As Tony accepts the plate and begins to eat with a steady, unbothered appetite, the dynamic shifts. Tony consumes the meal, embodying the relaxed entitlement of a master, enjoying the service of his subordinate, while Paulie sits opposite him, his own plate untouched.
Oh, you're not hungry? My fucking stomach.
Paulie blames a stomach ailment for his lack of appetite. This physical rejection of food is a biological betrayal of Paulie's attempt to act normal. While his mouth makes jokes, his gut is in full revolt, incapacitated by the sheer terror of the situation. His body is in a state of fight or flight, rendering the act of eating impossible as he subconsciously braces for violence. Tony's inquiry is not one of concern, but of observation. He sees a man who is too nauseous to eat, likely recognizing that the source of the sickness is not a virus, but the crushing weight of a guilty conscience and the fear of imminent death. The predator is calm enough to feed, while the prey is too paralyzed to swallow. As the meal progresses, Tony initiates a subtle interrogation, a verbal trap designed to confirm his deepest suspicion.
And when you went down below, I thought I saw a whale. Let me dig a Jenny's sack. Was you told him, right?
Tony uses the environment to mask his intent, commenting on a whale in the distance to naturally segue into the topic of the deceased underboss. This is a masterclass in manipulation. Tony is observing Paulie's micro-expressions, looking for the flicker of recognition or guilt that will serve as a death warrant. Paulie, a veteran of the streets, immediately recognizes the danger of the topic. His internal panic spikes. He is forced to walk a rhetorical tightrope, needing to agree with Tony's assessment of the joke's humor to show loyalty to Paulie's attempts to play innocent, feigning ignorance of the specifics, but his anxiety is palpable. He knows that Tony is not reminiscing for the sake of nostalgia. Tony is hunting.
It's no big deal. I could hardly resist. Very funny, Tone. I don't know. He was a funny prick, that Ralph. I'd have loved to see John's face when he heard that crack. It's the broomstick up his ass.
Paulie's strategy is deflection, hoping to bond over their shared history of violence rather than their shared history of betrayal. Tony, however, refuses to let the prey escape. He shifts his attack from the specific crime to Paulie's character flaws, attacking the very essence of the man. He asks if Paulie has ever been checked for Tourette's syndrome, citing his nervous laughter and inability to keep quiet.
No, you ever had yourself checked for Tourette's? What? Hey, you got a tick or something? I don't know.
This is not a medical inquiry, it is a dehumanizing tactic. By diagnosing Paulie as psychologically broken, as a man with a tic who physically cannot stop talking, Tony is stripping him of his agency. If Paulie is merely a leaky vessel that makes noise involuntarily, then he is defective equipment. In Tony's mind, discarding a defective tool is easier than murdering a friend. It rationalizes the potential execution as a practical necessity rather than a moral failing. Paulie's response to this insult is tragic submission. He does not defend himself with anger. Instead, he rationalizes his behavior as a symptom of tension.
It's like some people grind their teeth when I'm nervous, tense or something.
The underlying message of his defense is an admission of fear. He is essentially telling Tony that his tic is caused by the proximity to Tony's own menacing aura. He is nervous because he is sitting across from his executioner. The tension culminates when Tony finally asks the direct question, demanding to know if Paulie leaked the information.
Come on, you told John about that joke, right?
Paulie stares out at the ocean, the vast indifference of the water reflecting his own isolation. In this moment, Paulie makes a calculated decision to lie. He denies the accusation with a flat, resigned tone.
It wasn't me, Tom. No? That's right.
Internally, both men know the truth. Tony knows Paulie did it. Paulie knows that Tony knows. However, the lie serves as a final barrier. If Paulie were to confess, the rules of their world would demand his death. By maintaining the lie, Paulie offers Tony a shred of plausible deniability, a tiny space in which Tony can choose mercy without losing face. Tony's acceptance of the denial is not one of belief, but of resignation. He realizes that a confession is not coming. The scene then shifts physically, moving from the verbal interrogation to the precipice of physical action.
You want a drink? All right.
Tony moves to the stern of the boat, leaving Paulie seated and exposed. The visual language here is distinct. The camera lingers on the tools of the trade: heavy fishing gaffs, a hatchet, and knives. These are the instruments of the murder Tony has been contemplating all afternoon. As Tony stands behind the unsuspecting Paulie, the power dynamic is absolute. Paulie is looking away, surrendering his physical safety to the man he just lied to. In Tony's mind, the calculus of life and death is running its final loop. He looks at the back of Paulie's head, the head of a man who has been a father figure, a soldier, and a liability. Tony ultimately decides against the hatchet. The decision seems to stem not from forgiveness, but from a mix of pity and pragmatism. He views Paulie as pathetic, a lonely child seeking approval, rather than a malicious schemer. A child can be managed, a schemer must be destroyed. Instead of a blade, Tony hurls the beer can at Paulie's back.
Think fast. Jesus, Tom, fuck, that hurt.
The impact is violent and shocking, eliciting a cry of pain from Paulie. This action is a mock execution. It is Tony's way of saying that he could have killed him. He possessed the power, the opportunity, and the weapon, but he chose to inflict a bruise rather than a death blow. It is an assertion of dominance that reestablishes the hierarchy. Paulie, rubbing his chest and forcing a smile, accepts this abuse with relief. He understands the message perfectly. The pain is the price of his life. He accepts the humiliation because it means he gets to return to shore. The scene concludes with the boat cutting through the waves, the noise of the engine drowning out any further need for lies. They return to the silence that began the scene, but the nature of that silence has changed. It is no longer the silence of impending doom, but the silence of a master and his beaten dog. Tony has decided to keep his defective tool, and Paulie has accepted his role as the jester who survives only by the grace of the king's contempt. The remember when conversation has ended, replaced by the grim reality that their shared history is the only thing keeping them from destroying one another.